What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you.
Well, full disclosure here, I grew up as a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I went to a lot of games at Arrowhead, certainly was a huge fan since growing up, moving from Oregon to the state of Missouri. But my allegiances have changed over the years. I'm a Bills fan now, but the Chiefs are still near and dear to my heart. I'm going to have a little prediction about the upcoming Super Bowl 58, as well as how the Bills might be able to get there. That's coming right up. And welcome again to the Ed Kilgore Show. And of course, the sting still lingers of that tough Bills 3-point loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, who definitely made the Ravens look like a lot less of an opponent when they won the AFC Championship game and brought Lamar Jackson crashing back down to earth. Josh Allen is still very much in the vicinity of Patrick Mahomes, although right now you've got to give Mahomes his due. He's won 2 Super Bowls, is very much on the verge of winning a third one, and he deserves all the praise he gets. But again, Josh Allen is very, very close, and that includes the Buffalo Bills. They just have to put a little bit better defense in front of them. Before I continue, I'd like to thank my sponsors here. Atwell Eye Care, they did cataract surgery on both my eyes last summer, and it just worked out fabulously. I see everything very, very clearly now. Still use the glasses to help with reading, but looking at distances, everything is crystal clear. Couldn't recommend them more highly. Also, Blue Tusk Tech of Orchard Park, they'll fix your computer needs. If you have a used Mac especially, they specialize in bringing a used Mac back to life. I did that with mine. And Global Vending Group of Buffalo, they are establishing book vending machines all over the world right now to help with child literacy, so good for them. Now back to the Super Bowl coming up and what the Bills have to do to get there. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because that's for a separate issue, but continuity, as I said in my last podcast, I think continuity is the key. You're not going to change coaches now, change systems. Josh Allen turns 28 the coming season. The biggest worry with Allen as he gets into his later 20s, of course, is that he continues to stay healthy and on the field. That's one of the things that Mahomes has been able to do, as well as Josh Allen, who hasn't missed a start since his rookie season. So, but you've got the quarterback in place, and you've got a coach that I think is learning. McDermott has over a .600 winning percentage. He has the trust and the belief of the team on his side. He's a strong organizer. His teams play with discipline, which certainly we didn't see from the Ravens in the AFC Championship game. But I think he's the right guy. I think Joe Brady is the right guy to continue working with Allen, as he must step up just a little bit. But bigger than that, the Chiefs' defense has really helped Mahomes. There's no getting around that. The Bills gave them almost 7 yards of play in that game, and you just can't do that. And the fact that Allen kept it close within a field goal. Allen, as a matter of fact, in the last 7 meetings, he's won 3. Mahomes has won 4. All 3 of the Bills' wins came at Arrowhead Stadium. But the big asterisk there for the Bills is that all 3 of Mahomes' wins have come in the playoffs, and that's the final goal, is get to the playoffs and then find a way to get to the Super Bowl, and they have certainly done that. Looking at some of the misperceptions real quickly here about Allen and linking him with turnovers. Well, his playoff record, just for the playoffs, is incredible. He has accounted for 21 total touchdowns with only 4 turnovers, 4 interceptions, no fumbles, no red zone interceptions in the playoffs. He's been sensational, and his running has really made him different. That's the one thing Mahomes has cut down on and doesn't rely on his legs as much except to get first downs, but he's very, very good at getting that third and short. He is very elusive, and then he just makes plays. He makes things happen. and he's got Travis Kelce. I'm not going to say anything about his girlfriend here. Who cares? But he's got his go-to guy there. And I think Allen, in the coming season, I think you're going to see the Bills surround him with, he's already got a good base there with Kincaid, certainly, and Shakir, and keep our fingers crossed that the Diggs comes back to his normal form. He'll be back. He doesn't have a choice, so he will definitely be back. But growing up as a Chiefs fan, quick little story here where I really, really fell in love with Lenny Dawson and the Chiefs. Before the AFL-NFL merger, the Chiefs, and any old-time Bills fan knows this, the Bills were the team that was between the Chiefs and that first Super Bowl. They didn't even call it the Super Bowl until Super Bowl IV when the two leagues actually merged. But in the first year, the Kansas City Chiefs went up against the Green Bay Packers in the league professional football championship game, whatever they called it then, and it wasn't even a sold-out LA Coliseum for that game, and the Chiefs got kind of blown out. At least that's the way the score looks, 35-10 to the Packers, but the game was a lot closer than most people realized. The Chiefs had a lot of talent, and the AFL was much closer to the NFL than a lot of people thought. So while the Chiefs kept the Bills from going to that first Super Bowl, and the Bills, had it been a year earlier, the Bills would have been in the first Super Bowl, but we all know it didn't work out that way. But my connection with the Chiefs was somewhat then with Lenny Dawson, who, seeing him smoking a cigarette sitting in the locker room now is just crushing. I thought Lenny was, just a god or something back then, but he was a hell of a quarterback, and I loved their huddle where he would stand in front of the group, and you don't see that, you don't see any of that anymore. But in Super Bowl IV, that was the Chiefs were underdogs against the Minnesota Vikings, who had a really, really strong football team. And just about that time, that was January of 1970, I had a job opportunity. I just graduated from University of Missouri, had a job interview set up in San Antonio, Texas. I had moved back to live at home with my parents while I sent out resumes, made phone calls. You didn't have cell phones then like you do now, or social media. It was hard work, but I got a lead on a job down there. Well, halfway down, I loaded everything I had in my car, which wasn't a whole lot, a TV set and some other junk. My car, by the way, didn't even have air conditioning. San Antonio is not where you want to go with no air conditioning, but I hadn't even thought about that. I was just thinking about the job. There was an opening at WOAI TV in San Antonio, the NBC affiliate, for a reporter photographer. Now, at Mizzou Journalism, we learned all those things, but the news director wanted to hire somebody closer, more locally. His name was Bob Lundquist. Never forget Bob. So I drove down there, took 2 days. The first night I stopped was just outside of Oklahoma City, and the Chiefs-Vikings Super Bowl was the next day. And I stayed and watched it in my hotel room halfway down to my first job interview. And on the way, after that, I got caught in a rainstorm just around Oklahoma-Texas border, had to change a flat tire in the rainstorm, and the car was on a little bit of a hill, so I just remember it was the most miserable experience I've ever had. I was getting soaked, it was cold, my hands were freezing, the jack kept slipping. I don't even remember, there was no AAA, you were stuck with the job, and somehow I got the tire on, went down to watch the game. Chiefs won 23-7 was the final. And I was just on cloud nine. Went down, and that next day walked into the office with a suit on and met with the news director and walked out of his office with a job. And so looking around San Antonio, I remember looking around and going, man, there's a lot of palm trees around here. I hadn't even thought about the fact the weather was so good. But the love affair with the Chiefs continued as I grew up, again, moving from Oregon to Missouri in high school. And then in San Antonio, of course, the Cowboys were a big favorite too. But it was always the Chiefs for me, and my brother-in-law and my sister in Kansas City, and my dad, who's still living at 98, he's a Bills fan too now, my dad, I must say. World War II veteran. And but all of my family grew up as Chief fans, and I get it. And I was a Chief fan for a long time, but that started changing shortly after I got to Buffalo in 1973. They had just built a new stadium. OJ was cooking. You had the Sabres and the French Connection. It was a good time to get here. So the games against the Chiefs started becoming more meaningful in another way, because I now cared about both, but my heart could only be with one, and that turned out to be Buffalo fairly quickly. But I still remember one heartbreaker was December 4th, 1983. My mom was still alive back then, living in Kansas City, so we went to the game. It was in December. We had to scrape ice off the seats at Arrowhead, and the Bills were underdogs in that game. But I remember that a guy named Mike Kennedy was a defensive back in the fourth quarter of that game, a game the Chiefs were winning. He picked off an interception and ran it back probably 20, 25 yards for a touchdown, and the Bills got out of there with a 14-9 win, and I was really, really excited and happy about that. So I guess you could say that's when the tide was really turning. But one thing I have become somewhat objective on, I am the biggest Josh Allen fan there is. Everything about him, his physical attributes, his mental approach, his commanding presence with his teammates, the fact that he doesn't let his emotions, at least externally, explode to the point where Mahomes sometimes does. I thought that was pretty unsightly after the Bills beat them on the offsides call, or at least that was a big factor in that game. So minus points there. But in terms of what he has accomplished, Allen has been, like I say, great in the playoffs. He's 5-5, but he hasn't been able to get to the Super Bowl, and that's becoming, every year, it's going to become tougher and tougher. Mahomes has 2 of them, and dare I say, I think he's going to get a third. I think the Chiefs are going to beat the 49ers. I like Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. He was the last player picked in the draft a couple years ago, and normally, Chad Kelly was the last player picked in one of the drafts and just disappeared, but not Brock Purdy. At first, people were calling him a game manager, but he's turned into much more than that, and he showed in a big clutch comeback win against the Lions in the NFC championship game. He certainly showed that he has a lot of talent, but I just think Mahomes now, with his confidence, his physical maturity, mental maturity, I think he's going to be the difference in the game, and that will put him in a very elite group. Mahomes right now, believe it or not, is on a faster pace than Tom Brady was at this stage of his career. It's a fact. And I know a lot of you watching this don't want to hear about how great Mahomes is, but he is, and that's testament to what I think the Bills have been able to do. If it weren't for injuries, and I know that sounds like an excuse, but I think the Bills are good enough now, certainly were good enough to get the win and then go into Baltimore and get the win there. But again, it's like the 13-second thing. It just seems like there's a big cloud hanging there, but you have to get to the cloud to make it rain, if that makes any sense. The Chiefs many years ago, Marty Schottenheimer twice got home field advantage in the AFC playoffs and was one win away from a Super Bowl, lost the game, and the Chiefs fired him. They went into a tremendous funk after that and had a lot of bad seasons, and they finally rectified that by hiring Andy Reid, who got fired as the Eagles head coach, and since coming to Kansas City, Reid, who got off to a fairly slow start. In fact, he and Sean McDermott, their records through their first 5 or 6 seasons are pretty close. But Andy Reid did finally get a championship trophy, and his record right now in the regular season, 65-31. That's let's see, what is that? That is a winning percentage of almost 700. I mean, it's really high. But again, McDermott's record is almost equally as good, except McDermott's gotten the Bills to the playoffs all but one season that he's been here. So I think the Bills are headed in the right direction. But again, Mahomes, though, his playoff accomplishments, not just winning 2 Super Bowls, and he lost another one, where there again, defense, against Tampa, they just could not, they had no answer for Tom Brady. Kind of like the Bills defense, so banged up, had no answer for Mahomes and the Chiefs. But Mahomes has 39 touchdowns and just 7 interceptions in the playoffs. He's just magical, and that's one reason that I think they have a great chance to win that. But the Bills, believe it or not, lead the all-time series over the Chiefs. And let's see here. It's, well, I had it written down here. I know it's that the Bills lead the all-time series, not by a lot, but they do. And they've had some great battles over the years, both in Buffalo and Kansas City. And I distinctly remember in the Bills Super Bowl years, there was a Monday night game at Arrowhead, and the Bills, this was, I think, 92, and it was one of their Super Bowl teams. They're very, very good. And the crowd at Arrowhead that night of that Monday night game was deafening. Bills' offensive line, I remember Will Wolford just got clobbered, just undressed by the Chiefs' pass rush, and they sacked Kelly 4 or 5 times and won like 30, I think it was 33-6. But in the playoffs, the Chiefs had to come to Buffalo, and the Bills returned the favor with a very, very lopsided win in that game, 37-14. That's right. The Bills won at 37-14. And then in 93, that was in 91. So then in 93, Kansas City again beat the Bills at Arrowhead 23-7, and the game wasn't even that close. But then in the playoffs, Bills got Thurman Thomas going, and they cooked them 30-13. And so my sister and brother-in-law, they came up for a game though, and boy, this is one that you had to have been around for a while to probably remember this. But remember, the Bills had, because of injuries, they had to start a quarterback named Jeff Toole, who had come off the practice squad, and he started the game against the Chiefs great. This was back in November of 2013. So Toole threw a touchdown pass early in the game, and early in the fourth quarter, the Bills had the ball at about the Chiefs' 1-yard line, actually inside the 1. First and goal, ready to really put the game away. Toole threw the ball right to a guy named Sean Smith, who unfortunately happened to be, because I followed the Chiefs, probably the fastest guy on their team. He caught it about a yard in the end zone and had a clear path, 100 yards for a touchdown. And I was sitting out in the stands with my sister and brother-in-law, who were proudly wearing their Chiefs gear, and I told them they better hide. But actually, Bills fans, and my sister and brother-in-law both tell me that Bills fans were great to them. But that was a game the Bills wound up losing. They also had a fumble that was returned for a touchdown, and they wound up losing it by a score of 23-13. But in terms of what's ahead for Buffalo and Kansas City, of course, remember, Joe Burrow's going to be healthy again for the Bengals, so you're going to have to think about him. Is Brock Purdy in the class of Mahomes and Allen? Hard to say. I think this game will say a lot about that. But the list of superstar quarterbacks is a very short one. Right now, you've got to, because of his accomplishments. This isn't my opinion. It's just fact based on the accomplishments. You've got to put Mahomes up there at number 1. Josh is one of the few quarterbacks, I think, that has the ability and the motivation to break through that and do something about it. The window is far from closed for the Bills. They've got some tough decisions coming up. And I mentioned earlier, I think there's no question in my mind that they'll be, I think Von Miller will be back. They'd have to eat his salary no matter what, and he did start looking good later in the season. But again, I think they're going to retool the personnel a little bit, make it a little bit more explosive, and then I think they're going to be just fine. But again, I'm picking the Chiefs to knock off the 49ers 33-20. That's going to be the final score. The Chiefs are going to hoist their third Super Bowl under Mahomes, who moves into some pretty elite company. But the following year, 2024, I think you're going to see a surprising good run from the Bills. That's the way I always look at it. I'm the eternal optimist. But again, my thanks to sponsors Atwell Eye Care, Blue Tusk Tech, and Global Vending Group. And for all of those of you who have watched, I hope you're not upset that I am so glowingly familiar with and enjoy the Chiefs. But the Bills are still my team, and go get them next year. See you next time.